We're at the German Underground Museum in La Valette in the parish of St. Peter Port on the island of Guernsey. Your postcard today. Evan, we are underground here. Well, almost there's a shaft of light there, and at the back there's a lot of artifacts, regalia, ceremonial. Where are we?
We're in one of the tunnels built by the German occupying powers during the occupation of Guernsey, Russell, between 1940 and 1945. They planned 40 altogether for Guernsey alone. Of course, there will be more on Jersey. And they planned 40, but they only completed about 6 here, and this is one which they completed. It was thought maybe, because there are some very large fuel tanks in here, there were 4, there's only 1 left now, it was thought maybe that they were going to be used to refuel U-boats which could go in the bay just beyond this underground tunnel. But they were enormous complexes. In fact, the whole of the island is covered in German underground positions. They brought in a total of 270,000 cubic meters of reinforced concrete on this island alone.
Where did they bring it from?
All of Europe. As they came through, they captured equipment and materials, and they just brought it in. So they had an enormous shipping operation bringing this stuff in, and of course weapons as well, because many of the weapons on Guernsey used by them were French, Dutch, whatever. A great mixture of equipment and material here.
So let's go back then to the invasion of the Channel Islands, specifically yes. Guernsey, as we're here.
Yes, of course.
What actually happened? What led up to the invasion of this island?
Well, of course, Hitler had come right through Paris, conquered Paris, captured Paris, and then his forces had come straight up against the Channel ports, St. Malo and Cherbourg. And of course, just across was Great Britain, but even closer, a little bit left, were the Channel Islands, and they were British. And so it seemed, presumably to him, to be an ideal propaganda weapon to capture a bit of British property. And so they came in on June the 30th. 1940 and landed here. They did bomb the harbour before they landed at the airport because they saw a lot of trucks going out, being loaded onto ships, and they thought they were British military personnel. In fact, they weren't. They were loading tomatoes onto ships, and they bombed the harbour and killed 30 of our local civilians. But then they landed at the airport on the 31st, I think it was, and for 5 years then they occupied Guernsey.
Was there much opposition?
No, there wouldn't be any opposition on Guernsey. It was too small. There was no resistance, unlike maybe in the major countries of Holland and France. No, there wasn't. There was a little bit, and some of them were deported for having radios and other things they did, which the Germans didn't wish them to do. But so it was complete German military authority. But of course, Hitler was going to invade England, and this was Operation Sea Lion. And then when he started planning that, the Channel Islands would have been a very useful stepping off stone to get into Britain. And of course they would have brought back their wounded from the front in England. They would have brought them back to the Channel Islands, because both Jersey and Guernsey have 2 enormous underground hospitals.
And as you wander further down, you begin to see how these islands really did have to take so much battering. There's a Nazi flag here that was brought back from Germany to the island, and all along here this whole wall is peppered with stories of, for instance, people executed for espionage there, somebody else who was sentenced to death for trying to release a pigeon over to Britain to get messages through. And in here we have the model, a tableau scene of Germans as they would have been sending messages back to the main communication centre, which is in St. Peter Port, perhaps a mile just down the road. So when you come here to this place, you get that sense of history that you can only get by looking at artifacts, real newspaper headlines, and just getting the scene as it was, transporting you back those many years to when Guernsey and Jersey and all the surrounding islands were the only parts of the British Isles that were actually ever occupied by Nazi Germany.